Welcome to the Remembering Podcast, the podcast designed to help you remember who you are. We are your hosts out of Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Taylor.
I'm OnenO.
I'm KK.
And today we wanted to dive into a topic that feels incredibly appropriate. It's on all of our hearts. We want to talk about, everybody's talking about the path towards healing, right? We want unity, we want reconciling, we're feeling, torn apart at the seams. And it came up in conversation with us a little bit ago that one of the truest paths toward healing, especially when it comes to relationships that have been severed, is forgiveness. And forgiveness might just be the main ingredient when it comes to how we move forward as a society. However, it's a really intimidating topic and it's a lot easier said than done. And so there's a lot of things to unpack here. Totally. And I'm really curious what your thoughts are, or if you guys have had personal experiences where you have had to forgive in your life and maybe what that looked like. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a big subject. And I think that it's the reason why I wanted to talk about forgiveness is that there's this whole dynamic going on in our culture of reforming and reshaping so many things. And everybody is trying to do that. They're trying to do healing. Like that's kind of the word that keeps coming up is we're trying to heal from this or heal from this past trauma as a society and as a culture. But I find it interesting that in those conversations, the words forgiveness are not used really at all. And the ideology of forgiveness is not really promoted. And in some ways, forgiveness is still seen as a weakness or something that is, just it's not seen as cool or the thing to do. And yet I've been on my spiritual awakening path for about the last 10 years. And throughout those 10 years, the topic of forgiveness has come up over and over and over again in my life. And it's been the number one thing that I can say has genuinely helped to reshape and reform my own life. That if I just stay in my bitter heart or my victim ideology or my retribution desire, nothing ever changes for the positive. But when you choose to forgive, that's genuinely the first step towards forgiveness. And there's so much more I want to say on it, but I'm going to pass it to you, KK, and let you kind of introduce your idea on the subject too.
So the first time I heard this poem was the first time I really understood forgiveness. And I'll say that in a minute. But growing up in the church, I was taught all the Bible scriptures around forgiveness that, when you say your prayers at night, forgive those who trespass against us. And, like I would have this thing inside of me that was like, God, I'm so sorry if I've hurt anybody's feelings or if I've trespassed against them. And I ask that they forgive me and I forgive them. And I really didn't understand what I was saying as a child. Like, I think I was saying that more about like, oh my God, if I don't have forgiveness, then I'm going to go to hell if I die. Like that was more about like self-preservation. Mm-hmm. But there's a Rumi poem. And when I heard this poem, probably about 7 years ago, I was like, that is forgiveness. And it says, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. That's actually Mark Twain, not Rumi. So fact checking.
Yeah, a little left turn there at the end.
Yeah, sorry, everyone.
Can you read it again? Can you read it one more time?
Yeah, so, and I do want to kind of break this down for a minute. So Mark Twain said, forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. And I love that word fragrance. The violet released its most beautiful quality on the very thing that struck it down.
Yeah.
And so when we personally get striked, whatever offends us or whatever we doesn't feel good, it's a kind of abrasive. How do we respond? Do we give our most beautiful side as that violet does? Or do we retaliate and, I'm going to give a heel for a heel, eye for an eye, actually, I think that learning to become like that violet is probably the most useful thing that we could ever, as on this journey of life, learn to cultivate within ourselves.
Yeah.
Learning to
Totally.
turn the cheek, as Christ says.
Yep. Yeah. There's a Buddhist quote that talks about how I can't remember verbatim, but I think it's talking about revenge. And it's saying revenge is like picking up a hot coal to throw at the person that you're upset with, but you just end up burning yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so true. And I think there's also something about this karmic cycle uh, that, you know, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. You have, let's just make up an example and say that there's, you know, a brother that's upset with another brother and they get into a fight. And then the one brother kills that other brother. And then next thing you know, that other family wants retribution against the murder of their brother. And then they get their retribution. And it's just a back and forth constantly forever. And I feel like this goes on and on and on, generation after generation after generation. And so the real question then becomes, how are we ever going to stop this type of a cycle? And this is where the ego will immediately get challenged, because the ego then says, you stop it, you forgive me. And that's not how forgiveness works. So we have to, well, my microphone did something weird, but we have to actually go into our inner landscape and we have to call forward that voice of forgiveness first. And I think I'll unpack this even more as we all continue to talk about this. But I want to help people out there understand the power of forgiveness. That forgiveness is not actually weakness. It's not allowing somebody to get away with things. It's actually just a removal of a certain story. That's the way I think I want to frame it. It's just allowing the pain to be there, allowing the frustration to be there, allowing the disappointment to be there. But you then choose to change the story within you about how you're not going to use that as the centerpiece of your life, and you're not going to hold this grudge forever, because it's really the grudge element that I think keeps you stuck.
Mm-hmm.
The trauma has come and gone, but now you're stuck in a grudge forever until you forgive. So it's not about condoning something else. Like if somebody is
Right.
abused in a horrible way, forgiveness doesn't say, you know what, abuser, I love you and we should just be BFFs, you know? That's
Right. So
not
that's what I was
forgiveness.
going to ask. Like,
Yeah.
what does it say for victims and the topic of victimization
Mm-hmm.
and people who are being abused or taken advantage of?
Yeah.
Like, how does forgiveness fit into that story?
I think it comes down to an emotional stance.
Mm.
It's kind of the emotional stance of, I'm not going to let this define me,
Mm.
especially in the negative sense. I'm going to look for the positive things that I can find in here and focus on that and grow from there. Because let's take your example and make it even more literal. So somebody gets victimized, and let's say it's some sort of sexual abuse. That's incredibly traumatizing.
Mm.
So then what? Um, on one hand, let's say one person, it crumbles their entire life. For the rest of their life, their emotional states are just distraught, and they're a victim in their mind for the rest of their life. And they never have any closure with the person, and that's, you know, that sucks. On the other hand, the same situation may be true as far as never getting closure and never having any sort of uh, retribution or something like that. But the emotional stance could be different, where then you end up becoming stronger because you have stepped up. You have stepped up to say, you know what, this happened in my life, but it's not going to define me as a victim. It's not going to define me for the rest of my life in a negative light. And then that person could go on to actually end up inspiring people, and sharing their story is an act of inspiration now and an act of hope for other victims out there that can say, to themselves now because they see this example of, wow, I don't have to be a victim anymore. I was victimized, but I don't have to be a victim.
Yeah, I think that the decision to forgive and the decision to stop the abuse in its tracks both stem from a sense of self-worth.
Yes.
That if you believe that you are inherently worthy and valuable, one, you're not going to put up with the abuse and you're going to set a healthy boundary to the best of your ability in the situation that you can. But two, if you believe that you are inherently worthy, you are not going to hold on to the emotions that bring you down and make you feel miserable. You
Yeah.
say, I am worthy of not holding on to this anger because the anger is burning me up inside and I want to be happier than that. So I'm
100%.
going to forgive you. I'm going to acknowledge that maybe, and this is hard, but maybe the abusers was doing the best they could in the context of their story and what they knew and what they were equipped to do.
Mhm.
And also I'm going to get as far away from them as I possibly can because I'm worth more than that.
Yes, that's
But
why
then
there's a
moving on.
difference between what you're saying is so beautiful, because it's laying out that action must be taken. You don't want to stay around these people. You don't want to just continue putting yourself in their presence. But also the contrast, though, is this word retribution keeps coming up, and revenge and grudge and those type of feelings. Though that's what we hold on to for way too long. And also, I'd like to maybe reframe how we're even talking about this, because there are these obvious subjects of, sexual abuse or actual murder or something strange and like intense like that. But I believe that this actually goes on way more often on a very smaller level. It's like, oh, she said this to me and now I'm fucking pissed at her. And then that's it. And now it's the same, internally speaking, the same level as I was sexually abused or they killed my brother. And so that's
You have a
actually,
coworker that's super passive aggressive and it just builds up over a
yeah,
time and you just never let it go.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there are the obvious, big, real hard topics to talk about. But I believe that this all plays out in our lives multiple times every single day in these really silly ways.
Yeah.
Where it's, I was trying to park and then Jerry took my parking space and now I'm mad at him
Jeremy's
for
the
a year.
worst.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's always Jeremy's fault.
He sucks.
I just can't forgive it, Jeremy.
This reminds me of a story time, everyone. Quick story.
Yay.
But once upon a time, I was at the craziest mall in Nashville. It's called Opry Mills, and you cannot go there unless you're have no other
Prepared.
options.
Yeah, exactly.
This was probably about 6 years ago, and I think if we can, like, as I tell the story, like maybe think about things that are happening right now in the world, because there's a lot happening in the world that this could relate to outside of this like personal conflict that happened. But there was no parking spots, and this couple was walking out to a parking spot, and I just kind of like put my blinker on. I know that's not my spot. I know they have to put their stuff in and then back out. But I just kind of observed. I wasn't like up on top of them. I was a distance away. I gave them plenty of space. I was by myself, no rush. And I noticed that this man and this woman had a baby and they had a lot of bags. And he decides to take a seat on the trunk while she unloads all the bags into the car. And he takes a cigarette out, he lights it. And then she's like wrestling with the stroller, not rolling down the hill and killing their baby as she's trying to get the bags into the car. And then she's getting the baby into the car seat and he's just puffing away. And I'm watching this scenario and I'm like, I want to just like help this woman. Like she needs help. And he is so disconnected from like what's happening right now. Or maybe he's not disconnected. Maybe he knows exactly what's happening and he doesn't give two shits. So I just kind of stay out of it. I'm observing. Then she gets the baby in the car, shuts the door, and lights one up, pulls out, not kidding, a Mountain Dew, and then they start sharing this Mountain Dew, and they're on the trunk of their car. Nothing wrong with if that's what you choose to do, cool beans. But this whole entire event probably took about 10 minutes, and they saw me standing there or like in the parking spot. So I roll up. I just felt this like deep, I thought to myself, I just want that woman to know she's worth more. Like, that is it. And so, unsolicited advice that I decided to give, I roll up next to them while they're sitting on the trunk. And I just looked at her. I didn't even look at him. And I just said, hey, I want you to know you're a really good mom, and you do deserve someone to help you. And she jumped off the back of her car, threw her Coke bottle at my car, and called me a bitch.
Oh my God.
So
Yeah.
I pull away. My heart is pounding out of my chest. Like, what? That was not how that was supposed to go. And I remember thinking, I hope that maybe she went home that night and laid in bed and thought about that moment of like, maybe that woman did see, like, maybe that was maybe someone's never told her she was a good mom. And, you know, maybe that like when she got a moment to like of silence to herself, maybe, I don't know, that's like me being wishful thinking and hoping like that was more beautiful than not. But she did not want my help. She did not want my words. She did not want to see beyond her current situation. She was fine with her current situation. And so
she also heard what you weren't saying, which was kind of what you were, but not out loud saying, which was, this dude with you is a flunky who's not helping you out. It sounds like she was a little offended about that.
Probably. But, you know, like sometimes truth hurts, right? So, yeah, sometimes the abrasiveness needs to chill, but that was the black and white of it. I know there's a lot of gray, but I do think that, you know, when we come back to like forgiveness and like holding these grudges, I have no idea what happened to her when she was younger or what her upbringing was like. Maybe she was used to men treating her that way, and maybe she didn't know any other way of life, right? But when someone does show kindness or does want to help, it is immediately presented within themselves to be defensive or to continue to prove their current stance. And until a person truly wants to change, they're always going to be trying to prove themselves because that ego side of themselves doesn't want to be wrong. So, for example, we live in America. It's a super young country. America is young. We're infants compared to like Italy, you know, just all the other countries in the eastern part of our great world.
Yeah. I always hear us compared to Rome. However, Rome fell when it was 4 times as old as we are.
Right.
Exactly.
We're about a quarter of the way through.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of history in America that people are like really angry about right now, and they're wanting to change, and they're wanting, you know, let's completely erase what has happened in this country of ours. But this country of ours has been really kind and good to us. And it was at one point a safe place, a refuge from many, many countries that had socialism and communism happening, and they had their literal homes taken from them. And so our great grandparents had America as a refuge. So for me, like, I feel like I should forgive a lot of the things that maybe were done in the beginning stages of this country, ignorantly, maybe selfishly, probably a lot selfishly, but like, I think we'll learn more from our history than trying to erase it. And so like forgiving those that do the best that they can at the time presented, than forcing our personal ideologies or our now educated stance on something, because our outlook today is not the same as it was in the 1500s, whatever. We started establishing different rules and ways of living and ways of thinking.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to what you're saying that there's the kind of, in my opinion, a illusion that America started in this place, so America is this place. America has changed so much over the last 250 years that where we are today is light years ahead of where we have been and where we were. And so that's part of what I think is kind of strange about some of this call to burn it all down and like throw it all away. It implies that what started 200 and some years ago is still exactly what it is today. And it's like, no, it really is not. America is actually the most diverse country. It is actually the most tolerant country. It is actually the most free country. And if you don't believe me, just go look at the rest of the world. See, I want to interject right there a little bit too. When I traveled with Rihanna touring as her keyboard player, I kept a list in my phone of all the countries that we toured to. I traveled to over 35 countries in 4 years, and I was able to see all kinds of different cultures, all kinds of different forms of government and forms of society. There's a lot of beautiful places out there, but what I immediately became aware of is that America is a very unique experiment going on the planet. And so the idea of free speech is being reformed at this part of our societal game to mean, oh, you want to protect hate speech? No, we don't want to protect hate speech. But guess what? We know if you analyze the past, the moment that you give one body that we call government or dictator the ability to limit speech, we then immediately fall down a rabbit hole of never really being able to control that totalitarian authoritarian figure from being able to prevent us from speaking our minds. So the moment, like, and here's one example that I give to my girlfriend all the time when she and I kind of go down these rabbit holes. Imagine for 1 second that one group of people, and I'm not going to single anybody out, but one group of people wants to ban one word that they find in, offensive and hateful towards who they are as a group. Okay, so that now, let's say that they are able to get our government to then completely ban the use of this one word, or maybe it's just like, you're going to get fined. I can now fine you. I can call the cops and fine you $1,000 for saying this to me. Okay, well, now you've just opened up a major Pandora's box, because now you've given the government the power to do this, whereas before they had no such power. So now come along the Christians and they say, hey, you know how everybody always says Jesus Christ when they're upset or when they're frustrated? Now the Christians want to protect that word. And now, other people want to protect this word and other people want to protect that. And next thing you know, it just goes and goes and goes and goes. So what we've already experienced in our past is that the best way to actually handle all of this is to allow all speech to be free, so that free speech can moderate other free speech. And that's,
Yeah, because that's not saying that you can say whatever you want and have no consequences.
yeah, there's still
It's
consequences.
saying that other people can come back at you and say, actually, that's not acceptable and this is why. And they're allowed to say their piece as well.
And that's debate. And that's the foundation of what free speech is trying to facilitate for our country, is the idea of debate. And we have this belief then that, and I think it's such a good belief, that debate is far better than, just trying to imprison somebody for how they think or how they talk. Debate actually is designed to benefit the listener. It's not even designed to benefit the two people in the debate. The debate is designed to benefit the audience, because then the audience is able to understand it. And this is why I find the whole thing is kind of weird to me, that we try to shut down these debates, or that I do know I was following Jordan Peterson a lot back in 2017, and he would have all of these people come in and protest his lectures in the halls that he was in, because their belief was that he was a fascist, and therefore as a white male, as a straight white male, if he just was given the platform to speak, that was hateful. It wasn't even what he was saying. It was what he was saying, but he was always, I saw so many clips of him doing this, trying to talk to those protesters in the middle of his lecture and be like, come up on stage, here's a microphone, let's talk it out. And they would just be like, no, because then we're supporting you, quote unquote. Because they believe that by listening and giving a microphone and entering debate, that's supporting fascism. Meanwhile, the actual definition of fascism is to do what they're doing and to shut people down without allowing them to speak and without allowing them to present themselves.
So I think that that's a really interesting example at like a national level of the way that we've been engaging recently, especially in the last few years, especially with social media, and how does that impact our freedom of speech? Because everybody has a soapbox now, you know, instead of just some people. And so it feels so much more intense and epic because social media has just proportionally blown it out of the water. I want to zoom in to a personal example, not personal, but for me, but there's this one person, there's an author who I really like, who I've learned a lot from, who had a book come out last year. And I had been talking to a friend of mine saying, I'm so excited about his new book. And they sent me a few days later a article online saying, I don't know if you'd seen this yet. I wanted to make sure you knew about this. And it was an article where 9 or 10 women had gotten together, and from 10 years ago, they had felt that this particular author had, when they were under his employment, manipulated his power, led them to believe they were in a romantic relationship with him, bribed them with gifts, and they decided to all get together and release these complaints against him under the umbrella of him launching this new book, which felt very timely and
you
pointed.
Were excited about the book.
I was excited about the book. And so a friend of mine sent this to me and said, I just want you to be aware of this. This guy's actually a scumbag. And I read the article and I was disheartened because I've respected this teacher a lot. I've learned a lot from him. And then I did a little bit more Googling, research we call it these days. I did a little of my own research and saw that he had posted on his own blog a response to the complaints of these women. Yeah. And he said, you know what? I did do those things. Those are valid. I was immature in my leadership. I didn't understand the power that I had. I'm so sorry that I misled you all. I have come to terms with it in my marriage. My wife has forgiven me. We still have a strong relationship. A lot of the work I do now is me making amends for some of my shadowy behavior from my past. And I hope that you will forgive me and we can move forward. It doesn't change what I've been writing about. Actually, it further supports me wanting to help other people move towards healing in their own lives.
Yeah.
That was what I got out of it. And I thought, yeah, that sure. It was a while ago. We learn from our mistakes. We move on. And so I bought the book and I've just, been working my way through it and I moved on with my life. So a number of months later, I was talking to the friend that sent me the article.
Yeah.
And they said, so how's that been sitting with you? The news that he's a terrible person. And I went, oh, well, he issued a public apology that felt really valid to me. And it addressed all of my personal concerns, and so, yeah, I mean, I still support him. I still learn from him and we've all made mistakes, right? And the friend said to me, well, I just don't think I can support someone who does behavior like that. I just don't think that I could ever support anyone that has done things like that. Mm-hmm. But he apologized. Right. Like when do we move on to the forgiveness part? Like
exactly.
It's this kind of arc of cancel culture of you did something wrong, you're dead to me forever. What about when they apologize? Do we still refuse to forgive them and harbor the anger towards them? Because yes, they victimized someone at one point, but then they said, you know what? I was in the wrong. Can I have a second chance?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I made a YouTube video about 2 or so years ago called America's Zero Forgiveness Policy. Because it just popped into my mind one way. Exactly what you're saying, Taylor, and I think you articulated it so well. I think about what you're saying in regards to the Kevin Hart example, where he got canceled from hosting the Oscars. That was such a wild situation because so Kevin Hart, just to recap really short amount of time, the bullet points, he made some jokes in a stand-up special about how his son was doing some certain behaviors and he called it gay. And he was like, I don't want to have a gay son. That'd be like the most terrible thing ever. And it's a joke, but nonetheless offensive. So he gets called out a few years later, because cancel culture wasn't really a thing at that time. But around 2011, I think the joke was originally in 2009. Around 2011 or 2012, he got called out for it and he issued an apology on his Twitter. And he said, you know what? I understand that now. I apologize. And I'm no longer going to be making this joke in my stand up. And then the truth is, for the next several years, up until the Oscar timeline, which I believe was 2019 or 2018, I don't remember when that was. It was in the last 2 years, I think. From 2011, when he made the apology, to this Oscar moment, several years later, he's never made another gay joke in his stand-up specials. And then it gets announced that he's going to host the Oscars. And so then the Twitter armchair warriors want to get him canceled from that. And the truth is, it was probably a few dozen people, just a handful of people that I believe that these people want to see how much they can affect society by making noise. And I believe that's their number one goal. So they see that Kevin Hart's announced and then they go to bat and they're like, oh, we're going to take this person down. And then Kevin responds as soon as all of this, noise is being made. He responds by saying, look, guys, you're demanding I apologize for something I've already apologized for and something I've already changed in my life. If you want to have the proof for this, go look on my Twitter page and also analyze my comedy specials for the last 7 years or so. I'm literally a different person. I've literally changed and upheld my change. But it wasn't enough. And so then he goes on a PR tour where I love this moment in time where he's just refusing to talk about it. He talked about it for a while, and then he starts going on all the PR junkets, all the morning shows and late night shows and podcasts, and everybody's asking him the same freaking question. And he finally gets to this point where he's like, I'm not talking about it. Well, don't you want to set the record straight for our listeners? He's like, no, I've set the record straight here, 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 and here, and years ago in the past. So I'm not going to do it just for your channel anymore. I'm done talking about it. And the truth is, it didn't go well for Kevin. He still got canceled. And I don't believe that he created it to be a bigger problem, but his actions created a larger problem. And then what this just reveals in such a clear example to me is that these people are not interested in healing. They're not interested in forgiveness. They're not interested in helping you learn a lesson. They're interested in retribution. They're interested in bitterness and revenge and honestly just ego power. I wonder if I create such a big enough amount of noise that I could affect a celebrity like Kevin Hart. And I believe that that's kind of at the core of some of those conversations.
I think a lot of people are driven by the need to just be right.
Yeah.
They just want to be right. I have a quote I want to give you guys by Nelson Mandela.
Love it.
And he says, after he was recently released, after 20 years in South African prison, he tells a rally, quote, "We especially need to forgive each other because when you intend to forgive, you heal part of the pain. But when you forgive, you heal completely. So when you intend to forgive, like say, if they just say they're sorry and do what I tell them to do, I'll forgive them. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is literally you surrendering what the outcome is. There is, I shared this with you guys right before we hit record, but my favorite one of my favorite verses in the Bible is Matthew 18, 21 and 22. And it was Peter came up to Christ and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? As many as 7 times? And that's when Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. Like that's 70 times 7 is a lot of numbers there. We could go, there's a whole lot into that.
Yeah, I'm sure there's symbols in those numbers, but
yeah,
nonetheless,
absolutely.
it's an amazing message.
But it's like Christ is saying, infinitely forgive.
Yeah.
There's no stopping point to the forgiveness because there has been so much grace extended to you. I think if we really got into, there was a philosopher, I don't know the quote, but I can tell you what he said. I'm so sorry, I'll have to fact check this, but that gratitude is the foundation for all of their virtues to be built upon. So without gratitude in general, you will never reach a level of kindness or forgiveness or patience for another person. So really, I'm ungrateful when I need you to change what you're doing for me. There's a level of entitlement there. And, just being alive, we are divine co-creators with God. Like we have a lot of power within ourselves. But when you shift that and say, I am just grateful to be here. And how can I extend love today and understanding to someone who's in pain? That is what's going to change everything. Not, I need to be heard and you need to be quiet and you need to listen to me and you've got to, here's my list of things that need to be changed. And don't you dare say something that might offend me. Yeah. Because I don't know how to deal with that.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if now's the right time, but you were talking about personal stories. And I do have a very personal story. We talked about my relationship with my dad in our first podcast, our first episode. So if people want to really hear the nitty gritty of this story, go listen to that first episode. But to summarize, my dad came out of the closet. My dad was a pastor in the church for 33 years. And then he came out of the closet back in 2010, late 2010. And the ripple effects of that have been huge. But for me, as far as how it relates to forgiveness, this was an intense one. Like this is probably the most personal story I could share. Needless to say, the moment that he came out of the closet, it impacted me on some incredibly deep ways. And some were so deep that I didn't even know how to articulate them or find them, or they were more in my unconscious than my conscious mind. And so I eventually sought out therapy and started talking with a therapist and went through many, many angles of healing and dealing with this stuff, processing it. Some of these phases consisted of confrontation and talking things out and trying to, use words to process with my own dad, I'm saying. And so we had many hard conversations. A lot of the stuff I remember learning was boundary building. And, I'm comfortable with this and I'm not comfortable with that. And I'm happy to do this for you, but no, I'm not happy to do that for you. And just kind of coming into my own. I was around 25 at the time this was all going down. And but then there eventually, after about a year or two of really dealing with the hard confrontation, there started to take a turn in my relationship with him. And his heart was softening too. He was never an incredibly how do you say it, like hard-hearted person. It was just that he protected himself by presenting himself as straight for so many years that rippled out into other areas of like, you cannot question me. You can't, I am, what I say is real and it's fact. And, it's like, but Dad, I think you're wrong. And it's like, no, I'm not wrong, So by the time that my dad get 2 years into this phase, I'm starting to be a different person. He's starting to be a different person. And I remember there was this one conversation where we were on the phone late at night, and I just said to him, I was letting a lot off of my heart, and I was really letting go and being verbal. And I ended up telling him that I felt like he had lied to me my whole life, that I felt that he was never really there for me. Like I had to become a man as an individual. There's, this is a little too personal to share, but there's many parts of being a man that I never thought that he taught me. And in fact, he didn't. And he even acknowledges that years later. He says, yeah, you're a straight man being raised by a gay man. Of course, I missed a lot of things for you. And so the conversation I'm talking about, I just said to him, I was like, I feel like you've lied to me my whole life, and I feel like you just haven't been there. And then after that conversation, I noticed the immediate question that came to my mind is, well, now what? I felt like I had just kind of thrown up, and now it's all out of my system. And now what spirit was presenting me was, so are you going to stay there, or are you going to forgive? You expressed yourself, and luckily my dad is such a wonderful person that he handled that conversation very well. He didn't respond with intense anger or defensiveness. It was just like he just kind of took it. And if anything, I do believe he ended up apologizing. And I think that was the number one thing I never expected from him, was the fact that he apologized and he acknowledged that stuff. And so I think that's specifically why the question was left on my heart of what now what? What are you going to do? Are you going to stay here, or are you going to choose to forgive? And of course, my damaged inner child is like, well, I don't know how to forgive, and like what's world going to look like if I do forgive? But I trust spirit, and so I move forward with the idea of forgiveness. And there isn't some sort of Disney fantasy happy ending to this story, but our relationship has changed so much ever since then. And we've evolved into a new form of connection with each other that we never had in my youth. And so we actually do now have a very, very different, and in a lot of ways, a much more healthy dialogue with each other. And I know for a fact that we would not be in the phase that we're currently in if forgiveness was not in there. If there was no forgiveness, I wouldn't have a dad. Like that's just the black and white of it. And that's the hardest thing I've probably had to forgive. It's in probably my top 3 things I've been through in my life. And it just taught me, it's like, wow, if you really put yourself out there, if you really speak from the heart and speak from truth, you might actually get responses you didn't expect. But then because you didn't expect them, you got to now be even more present. And if someone's going to apologize to you like that, and it's a genuine apology, what are you going to do about it? Are you prepared to actually drop your story? If someone acknowledges it like that, are you prepared? Are you prepared to step out of the story that you want to continue telling yourself?
That's so beautiful. OnenO, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the time.
I think that question you just closed with is, are you prepared to drop the story? Byron Katie, who is a teacher that I really, really like, she has this thing called The Work, which is where she helps you break down your thoughts and beliefs that are causing suffering in your life. And a lot of those are tied to victimhood. I've been wronged. I'm holding on to this because it makes me feel powerful. The justification of me holding on to this makes me feel superior in some way. One of the things that she asks is, who would you be without that story?
Yeah.
And every time I have been caught in a belief or a thought that is causing me personal suffering, when I'm mad at I was mad at a boss and he did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. And I had just discovered her work, and I sat down and I was working through one of her worksheets where you break down the thoughts and you journal a little bit about it. And who would you be without that story? There's this immediate sense of releasing the world off your shoulders, of not having to hold on to that anymore, is like just like letting off a suit of chainmail, you know? And once you have entertained that feeling of freedom, it's really hard to keep holding on to the story.
When you feel the lightness of it, I think
yes,
that's the part that then starts to have an even deeper transformational effect. You get just a taste of it, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, it actually feels like this when I let it go.
Contrast, yes.
It's like, oh, now I want to do more of that.
I think that's the scariest part for people is, who am I without this story? Because it's I've created my entire identity around it, you know, like I'm short patience because this happened to me, or I have this chip on my shoulder because this is part of my story, you know? So, and Byron Katie, man, that worksheet stuff really changed the way I myself was able to release things or say, what if now? And what if then?
Can you guys give us more of a resource for this? Because I don't know.
Well, actually, if you go into your app store and search for the work, Byron Katie, and her name is spelled Byron and then Katie, Katie. She has an app that's 99 cents in the app store where it's all of the worksheets for how to work through this stuff.
Amazing.
Just right on the phone. Yeah, so
that's
easy.
A brilliant resource.
And she has numerous books and stuff that she has written, and there's YouTube videos and stuff too where you can see her working through this process with people.
Awesome.
But that app is what I reach for the most, just because it's so convenient.
That's so great. Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off, KK. I just wanted to make sure.
No, yeah. I actually discovered her
Luke's story.
It wasn't Luke's story. It was a different podcast. I can't remember, but I listened to every single, it might've been Luke's story. I can't remember. So when we choose to release that story though, and we forgive. So this has been something kind of like a saying that I've been saying to myself, a personal mantra. I cannot give to others what I don't have myself. And so how can I forgive others when I haven't forgiven myself?
Bingo.
So there's a lot of, if you are living in this life, through this life with, and you're thinking to yourself, like, I don't know how to forgive. I don't know how to forgive that person or my parents or this group of people. I would encourage you to sit down with yourself and maybe start extending some love to yourself and forgiving yourself. Because I think that when you sit down with yourself and you say, you know what, I really screwed up 10 years ago in that one relationship, or, you know, I really just like jumped all over that person, that cashier at the grocery store, and I don't know what's wrong with me. And being able to give yourself some grace and say, you know, I'm doing the best I possibly can right now. And I'm going to stop blaming other people because I myself haven't actually forgiven myself. Then once that forgiveness cup within yourself is full, you can start giving it out to other people.
Beautiful. Totally agree.
when we talked about chakras a few episodes back, and I shared that Carolyn Miss is one of my favorite chakra teachers, and this book, Anatomy of the Spirit, has fundamentally changed how I understand how energy flows through our body and the path of spiritual awakening as it relates to each of the themes of each of the chakras as we work our way up. But for her, one of the core takeaways from the fourth chakra, the heart chakra, is forgiveness. Because it's not just about compassion and warm, gooey feelings for people, which it is, but there's a huge component of self-love that goes along with the love of the heart chakra as well. This is an interesting point that she makes. She says, Jesus always first healed his patients' emotional sufferings, and the physical healing then followed naturally. It all comes out of the heart there. But then she says about self-love, she says, self-love means caring for ourselves enough to forgive people in our past so that the wounds can no longer damage us. For our wounds do not hurt the people who hurt us. They hurt only us.
Yeah.
That's good.
That's really deep and a great point. Yeah, I mean, there's so much of the inner work that must be done to find this emotion. And in a way, I think that it explains deeper for the people out there that understand what we're talking about and may feel equally frustrated with the world as it's presenting itself. I would say this might be the trigger point for compassion, because you then realize that these people that are incredibly bitter and incredibly loud and incredibly frustrated, they're externalizing a state that they live in internally, day after day after day after day. And the experience that they are having internally is so bad that this is how they're externalizing it. And that's where you can actually find compassion. And I just remember that moment with my dad. One of the things that shifted for me was realizing, you know what? My dad did his best. He actually did his best. My dad went through so much, and he, you know, there might be all these things that I'm disappointed about, that my ego feels unjustified about. But when I take myself and put myself into his shoes, I'm like, damn, he really did his fucking best. And that triggers compassion, because now all of a sudden I'm like, wow, okay, I can see it from his perspective, exactly what he went through and exactly what he was trying to do and all of his fears and all of his joys. And I can't even imagine being in his position. So I think this is another key to forgiveness, is really trying to see what it's like in that other person's shoes. And again, it's not about condoning, you know, like if someone's stealing shit from somebody else, you need to stop that action. If someone's abusing somebody else, you need to stop that action. But if we're talking about the heart and trying to figure out how to heal and move forward from these traumas, then yeah, understanding that that person is doing their best and trying their best, which may look wildly fucked up. It's still like, you know, that can help trigger compassion. It's like, wow, that person is living in this state, and that's why they are externalizing this state. And I think just actually being there for that person is probably the biggest way you're going to help them heal.
One of my favorite movies in the entire world is The Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh yeah.
In the book, obviously, like favorite book, but there is a movie that's really cool, and it's old. I mean, I think it came out in like 2001, something like that. But it is a beautiful storyline of extreme unfairness brought upon one person, and that person seeking revenge. And then in that he is seeking revenge, he was given the opportunity to actually carry that out at the end, at the end scene. But he asked the person who, Ferdinand, I don't know. I think that's he asked him, like, are you sorry for what you've done? And the guy said, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I guess I am. Like, kind of like, not really like super apologetically, but just like, yeah, I guess I am sorry for the things I've done because it's led me here. And then the Count of Monte Cristo says, okay, then I forgive you. And doesn't continue with the revenge. He just, okay,
Yeah.
like that's it. This is the end of the story then, because ultimately I thought I was seeking revenge, but actually I just wanted to know you were sorry. And when we do express that compassion and that humanness, that vulnerability to each other and say, yeah, I'm really sorry. Okay, cool. Let's heal and let's move together and let's grow and like become something bigger and greater than this a hierarchy.
Totally. Yeah, you're reminding me of a new show that I just got exposed to called Ted Lasso. Have you
Yes.
seen this, Taylor?
Love David
Oh,
Seducas. He's such a
yeah.
sweetheart.
He's so it's amazing, this
Yeah.
show. It's on Apple TV. It's called Ted. It's either called Ted or Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
I've only seen the first episode because I don't have Apple
Okay.
TV, but my sister showed
Okay.
it to me when we were together, and I can't wait to keep going whenever I get access to someone's
Spectacular.
Apple TV account.
Yeah. So I'll have to give a slight spoiler warning. I'm not going to totally
Okay.
spoil everything, but this is kind of predictable, as every TV show is built, it's built on drama. So shit happens and people have ulterior motives, and then gossip starts and backstabbing starts, and it's not that intense. It's a very lighthearted show, but there's a main plot line that starts in episode 1, which is that the main woman inherits this soccer league from her now ex-husband. And so because she now owns his previously prized possession, she decides to hire the most incompetent person she could imagine to coach her soccer league so that she can tank the soccer league. And that's her goal. So she ends up hiring this American. The show takes place in London. She ends up hiring this guy, Ted Lasso, and comes on over to London. Then, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and comedy ensues. And so I won't spoil any of the story, but towards the last episode or two, that truth finally comes out, and Ted now finally learns from her, confessing to him. I've been trying. I actually hired you because I thought you were stupid and I wanted you to wreck this league. And you came in here with your pure heart and you're trying to make this league amazing. And I'm a terrible person. And I really wanted to use you, and I wanted to use you to get revenge at my ex-husband. And oh God, it's literally giving me chills now. I've watched this whole season twice, once by myself and once with my girlfriend. I cry like a baby during the scene because Ted, it's this moment, right? It's just like it lingers there. She gets done talking and all of a sudden there's this lingering, and then he just walks over to her. And I'd noticed the mind programming in my mind from every other show I've ever seen. It's like, this is the moment where he's going to get pissed and everything's going to fall apart and blah, blah, blah. But it lingers. He walks over to her. He like looks her right in the eyes and he says, I forgive you. It's just the first words out of his mouth. He's like, I forgive you. And God, this scene, it just gets me because I'm like, I felt like I'm taking a soul shower. I'm like, thank you for this positive content out there, that we don't just consistently perpetuate drama for drama's sake. It's like, how brilliant that there's this show now that's showing the power of forgiveness in one of its final episodes.
That character, I only saw the opening episode, and his portrayal of this character just warmed my whole heart. So like, I can't wait to keep going. And I accidentally called the actor / writer creator of the show David Sudeikis, who's a different person. It's Jason.
Yeah,
it's Jason Sudeikis.
I
want to make sure I get that clear. But
I love
so
him.
Amazing. So I have a question.
Yeah.
So KK informed us at the top of the show that forgiveness is a value trait. It's something that we can list with gratitude and kindness and empathy, things like that in our life. we have skills for other values. You know, we're told if you want to feel grateful, sit down and make a list of the things you're grateful for. Or if you want to be kind, go out and do something nice for somebody else. When it comes to forgiveness, it's a little harder to turn that light switch on, to engage that trigger. So I'm curious from your guys' perspective, what you would recommend for someone that is aware that they may have some unresolved resentment or anger in their heart. They want to begin this process of forgiving, but it just feels really, really daunting. How do you start to move into that space? What would you tell that person?
Man, I think first of all, to this listener, you need to hear our Hero's Journey podcast, because this is the hero's journey. It's a dragon for a very specific reason. This is your inner dragon, your inner demon, the inner shadow that's not going to go away until you confront it. And then guess what? The hero, while the hero is ultimately capable of defeating it, the hero doesn't know how. The hero never knows how it's going to confront this dragon, how it's going to defeat the dragon. It just knows that it has to confront it. And so I would just maybe, I wish that my response could be maybe more practical and logical, and here's a 3-step process to do it. But life is not like that in this regard. I think the comfort I could offer you is that the promise of the hero's journey, and the reason why this is told and such a cherished story over and over, is that the promise is that you can defeat that dragon, you will defeat that dragon, and that the universe will conspire to help you defeat that dragon. But it all excuse me, my microphone's making weird noises. It all starts with the hero crossing the threshold and answering the call to adventure. So that's just where you start. And then you're starting a universal process. When you internally make an intention towards anything, you're engaging the creativity of the entire universe to bring that into fulfillment. So if you set the intention to forgive and your heart immediately says, I want to do this, and then your brain says, I don't know how to do this, well, your heart's going to win, and the universe is going to conspire to help you win. So it's much more about the intention and the direction than I think a certain step process. And that's just for me. I just have noticed for me, it's taken me years to get through this. And I think it's going to take you a while too, if you're in this boat. But the promise is that you will slay the dragon, you will defeat this inner shadow, and then you will receive the gold and re-enter the world as a healed person. And that will be your gold that you can now share with the world. So yeah, I wish I could be maybe a little bit more practical, but I'm a philosopher and a lover of myth and symbol. And I think that the reason why those myths and symbols work so well is because they teach us these type of lessons.
Well, I have kind of a relatable analogy. Say you're on the side of the street and you come across a dog who's rummaging through a garbage can, and he finds a hamburger. All right. So he's got this hamburger like hanging out of his mouth, and you go down to pull it out of his mouth. What do you expect is going to happen?
He'll growl at you.
Growl, bite you, charge at you, something, right? He's going to hurt you. And I think forgiveness, when you say, I'm ready to forgive someone, you must get into a state of understanding why this person did what they did to you. Just as the dog would bite your hand because he's hungry and he lives on the streets, we do not understand why another human might come into our lives and wreak havoc through deception or lying or just like passive aggressive tendencies like we talked about earlier. There's a whole slew of ways that people hurt and harm one another. And I think that the first step to forgiveness is really stepping outside of your own shoes and trying your hardest. It's really hard to do, but trying to put their shoes on and say, why did that person do that to me? And it really would, it's, you don't know how the person was, the language used in the home, the way that love may have been not freely moved about within the homestead of that person. You know, they don't know how to show love. They only know how to be abrasive, or they only know how to project anger because maybe they grew up with a mother who yelled at them all the time. So I think that forgiveness is, I mean, as corny as it sounds, it is really starting to learn how to observe other people outside of yourself and say, I don't really know why that person is doing that, but it's got to be way deeper than what I can comprehend. And you know, feeling empathy for that person, feeling compassion. So we have empathy and compassion, and then comes forgiveness.
Yeah, that's really great, KK. Thanks for bringing it back to a more human level than my mythological answer.
Well, I didn't want people to be like, is
No.
she saying I'm a dog looking for a cheeseburger and a trash can? But, you know,
that was great.
What do you expect, you know, if you put your hand down to someone who's hurting? It's like the analogy, or like the story I said earlier of me trying to talk to the lady and she didn't want my help. I should have put my own self, extended compassion. I could have prayed for her, whatever I needed to do. But sometimes
people may get a little more confused though when they feel like, well, I didn't take the first action. Like, I didn't approach the dog. I didn't approach that thing. That thing came at me. How am I supposed to forgive something that just came at me? But well, I do think that your answer reveals that same thing. But Taylor, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, and the truth is, even if you did not provoke the dog or the person who harmed you, they still harmed you for a reason. There's still there's more to the story than maybe we can comprehend or understand from our limited perspective. Totally. And I thought it was really helpful earlier, KK, when you pointed out that we cannot extend to others that which we have not offered ourselves or learned to embrace in our own lives. And so for me, I actually just did an exercise this week, and I think that's why it's on the top of my mind. A journaling exercise, because I'm really big into journaling. I'm just all the time writing things down, but sitting down and answering the question, is there anything that I have not forgiven myself for? And sitting and taking deep breaths and opening space to see what comes up, and writing those things out and trying to understand where we were at in that season of our lives. Why did we maybe do those behaviors or make those decisions that we're regretting now? Offering that forgiveness and that understanding to ourselves will then open up the door to offer that grace to other people.
Definitely. Well, I feel like we've reached a nice pause. We are going to start wrapping up because we are on a time crunch today a little bit. But we want to talk about one more thing, which is that our lovely Taylor over here is about to be giving birth to her second child.
Only 2 weeks away. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe we've arrived. So wonderful. I keep adjusting in my seat because I can't slouch anymore. Like every time I hunch my shoulders, my ribs bump into this bowling ball that's inside of my torso right now. And
you are ready to pop.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, so we wanted to have a brief conversation, transparency with our listeners out there, and let you know that Taylor is going to be moving on from the podcast. It doesn't mean it's the last time that she's going to be on the podcast, but it means that for now, it's just going to be KK and I continuing on with this. And we're so excited for you, Taylor. We know that you're going to bring in such another wonderful bundle of joy into this world.
He just did like a somersault in my stomach, like when you
Hey,
said
Care
yeah,
that.
'cause he
about your
knows we're
mental
talking about him.
also.
He sense he does know. Oh, I definitely don't think it will be my last time on the podcast. I will be pounding down the door to come and hang out again. I love hanging out with you guys and chatting with you guys, but I appreciate you giving me a little bit of space, a little bit of sabbatical to figure out this new season of life and um not make me feel like I'm dropping the ball when I can't commit to things as readily as my heart wants to. I get so excited about everything, but
You're gonna
my inner voice keeps telling me to take some space and
Yeah.
and take it slower. So I'm trying to
we will
listen.
miss you so very much, as you always bring in the best literary quotes and authors, things that like I feel like I'm like, who is she reading now? Like I love
Aw,
how expanded your library is.
Yeah.
thank
So,
you for saying that.
Yeah.
That's so sweet.
Yeah. This has all been wonderful. And I know I hope that we will definitely do more, the three of us. But
Mhm.
to be clear with the listeners, when you tune in, you'll be hearing me and KK. And,
Yeah.
you know, hopefully we'll get some more guests in here. I know we've started brainstorming about different people that we would like to have long, extended conversations with. So that is becoming our goals for the near future, is seeing who can we get into this podcast to just really nerd out with. And also for the listeners out there, if there's anybody that you think we should get in touch with, please reach out to us and either let us know, or if you have a contact, let us have that as well. And you can reach us at the rememberingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Instagram at the Remembering Podcast, and on Twitter is Remembering1111. And so yeah, just don't be shy. Reach out to us. We love having conversations with you guys as well. So stick around after this episode. KK is going to lead us in a wonderful meditation. And if you're whatever podcast platform you're listening on, it will be the next quote unquote podcast episode. It should be about 10 minutes long. So look for that. And yeah, do you guys have anything else to say, or are we just going to throw it to the outro?
I feel so satisfied. Thank you for spending so much time with me and supporting this season of life that I'm in. I love you guys so much.
100%. And we love you too.
We love you. And thanks everyone for joining us on this journey as we began the Remembering podcast. And the many, as life always does, presents changes and us flowing with
Yes.
how that what that river looks like.
Totally. Yep. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for coming along the journey. And we will be back on here in about 2 weeks, giving you some more conscious conversation. So, be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.